Good morning and welcome to Come ToGather. This week we have a fun topic that is so timely, not only because of all of the racial injustice topics that we've been discussing as of late, but also education and COVID and just kind of examining whether our educational spaces are culturally competent before we send our kids back to school and before we educators and parents jump back into the school year. So we have some great speakers here today who are going to chime in with their expertise from every level of education, from elementary to secondary to higher education and everything in between. And so without further ado, I want to introduce one of my dear friends to you, Miss Marta Youngblood, who will serve well, actually, no, I'm going to serve as the moderator today. Forgive me. But I want my friends to introduce you so they can tell you a little bit about themselves. And you can get comfortable with them and see how this conversation is going to flow today. Once everybody introduces themselves, I will kind of give a background on what we're going to do, and we'll jump in from that. If you are watching online, grab your friends. If you have kids, if you're an educator, if you're just curious, we want you to be a part of the conversation, and you can always chime into the comments, and we will see if we can pull some of those out and get those answered or contribute those to the conversation as well. So with that, Miss Marta, can you kick us off with an introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I hope the sound and audio levels are good. I'm Marta Collier Youngblood. I am from a family that basically education is kind of our business. At present, I am working as an educational consultant, grant business development consultant, primarily working in the education sector with Youngblood Associates, my company. I have a career that spans well over 15 years in working with higher ed and K-12, trying to bridge the gap, making sure we get resources where they need to be. And I've also had the pleasure of serving as the State Diversity Education Outreach Director for STEM projects in Arkansas at one point in my life. So happy to be here today.
Awesome. Miss Deidre.
Hello, I'm Deidre Douglas Williams, and I'm an educator. I'm a teacher librarian in the public school system. I've been teaching for over 20 years, closer to 25. And I also have a nonprofit called Delta Yes. And my purpose with Delta Yes is to ensure that youth in the Delta have opportunities. We live in a global society. There's no reason that we shouldn't have access to resources. And so I hope to teach kids about those resources and help them use those resources to improve their communities.
Awesome. And Miss Molly.
Hi, I'm Molly Humphries, and I am a parent and a dyslexia and literacy advocate in Little Rock, Arkansas. I also advocate for children all over the state of Arkansas in the public school system. So I help people navigate the laws, the state laws, the federal laws in order to get children the services that they have the right to. And I help to empower parents and
hello, my name is Andrea
Neal. Allow them to know that the system is created to help their child get what they need. I am a member of Decoding Dyslexia Arkansas, and they also have a national network that is not an organized network, but it is nationally known, that helps legislation across the state, across all the states. And so I work with educators on legislation also.
Very cool. And last, Miss Andrea.
Hi, my name is Andrea Neal. I am the Title IX ADA coordinator at UAMS. I oversee sex discrimination and misconduct allegations, as well as students with disabilities requests for accommodations. Prior to working for UAMS, I worked at Arkansas Baptist College, which is a small 4-year liberal arts HBCU here in Little Rock, as the ADA coordinator.
Okay, so this is how this goes. We have curated 5 questions that we think are pretty timely to the times. And so each lady will take a moment to respond to those questions. They'll have about 3 minutes to respond. And then if there's any follow-up, and again, if you want to drop your comments in the comments section, we will pull some of those out. So with question number 1, as professionals in this industry and parent, what are your perceptions on cultural competence in educational spaces as it pertains to students and professionals? Are the experiences different? Are they good? Are they bad? Or do they need improvement? What do you think, ladies?
So I'll go first. My first thought is that cultural competence covers a number of areas. And I think the area that we mostly think about is diversity and representation. And we have a question about that later. And I think that most of the study I've had, most of the experiences I've had when we talk about culture in our workplaces, we're really talking about diversity and representation. We really don't consider studying other cultures within our jobs. I do think we think about policy because we feel as if we have a diverse representation, then those people serve in making policy, then our policies will be diverse. I think that's our hope. But I believe that where I'm seeing deficiencies is that we're not really doing those other components, not actively in the public school setting. I'm not seeing us have a direct study of culture in reference to how we run our school. I think we want people to feel welcome of different cultures, but I don't know that we're necessarily directly studying and then implementing based on what we learn about other cultures in our work communities. So that's one thought.
Marta or Molly?
I can chime in real quick.
Sure, go for it.
I will say that I feel like we jump into the diversity thing as first being a problem that needs a quick fix solution. And we also see it as a problem of those who are counted as the minorities. It's their problem. They don't feel welcome. They don't feel they have access. They want this. They. And I think that really keeps the conversation very small. I'm a person who identifies as African American and female, but the challenges that I had were much more than what we limit to race and trying to fit in. I was born in Georgia, Savannah, Georgia, and moved at an early age to Iowa City, Iowa. My issues were not limited to a difference of racial or ethnicity differences. I was dealing with regional culture clash as well. And so I'm fortunate that at the time there were people who were sensitive to that and they did what they could to try to help. But diversity and inclusion is more than just making Black and brown children feel safe in a school environment. There are lots of factors to consider.
Molly, did you want to chime in?
I 100% agree with all of that. I see it in my advocacy. It's not equal, and that is something that I am addressing with the organization that I associate with. I'm also looking into joining a new organization and starting and helping to start a new organization in Arkansas around literacy and dyslexia. That is an inclusive organization. That includes people from diverse backgrounds, races, men and women across the board have to be a part of that. Something that I'm seeing even in the district, the Little Rock School District, one of the main districts that I advocate in, is how disproportional education is. If you simply pull the numbers for gifted and talented children, and they say, and the data shows, Caucasian, African American, it is astonishing how many African American students are not identified as gifted and talented compared to the Caucasian students. It is astonishing. And so that is one of the areas that I would like for a committee to look at and the district itself to address. Why aren't we identifying proportionally children, African Americans to Caucasians, the same? I mean, we're not, and it's blatant. It's right there in the numbers. It can't be denied. So I see it. I see it there. I see it in advocacy as far as talking about literacy And that's why we've made there's some changes that have gone on in the district to address that.
Okay.
But it's far from done. Far from it.
So my perception on cultural competence in, I would say, higher education, I won't say that it's all bad, but I think that we tend to hear the negative experiences louder than we hear the positive experiences. And so it's kind of like when your car is working, performing optimally, you don't really go in to get it serviced. It's usually when we hear a noise that we go in to see what's wrong with it. And so I think that in any situation, we expect everyone to conform to the majority, whoever the majority is in that space. And I think that until someone says something, we don't address what the issue may be. We don't look at microaggressions. We don't look at if we're excluding someone until someone comes to the table or barges in and say, hey, I'm being excluded. I think sometimes we try to, and this is from students as well as professionals. I think that sometimes we try to give underrepresented group a club or organization to make them feel included. But I think what that sometimes does, yes, it gives them a place to be able to speak freely, to get their to feel comfortable, but it also isolates them in the process. And so what I try to do is I try to talk to people about social inclusion. So everyone getting some type of training. The training doesn't necessarily have to be, we do a PowerPoint presentation and sit in a room for an hour or two to talk about how to be inclusive or to talk about other people, but it's what are those everyday steps we can take. I think that there are times when the situation are good, when people do try to bring minorities or underrepresented people to the table. However, the mindset is, okay, we got a Black person at the table. Well, that Black person doesn't have the same experience of every Black person on that campus. And so it shouldn't just be one Black person. And also I have to tell people diversity isn't just wheelchairs and Black people. You have other racial groups out there. You have the LGBTQ community out there. You have people from various socioeconomic classes that can also give different perspectives to a conversation.
I think that's spot on. And I think that's a great segue into our next question, which is from an elementary, secondary, or higher ed lens. What are some things that are being done right? And what are some things that need improvement? Let's pretend that we have the ear of the administrators right now for this conversation. And one example I want you to consider when answering this question is the lack of representation in the classroom. It's common knowledge that most people in their academic careers have had but a handful of people of color that have led their classrooms. So consider that when answering the question. And again, I'll repeat it. What are some things that are being done right? And what are some things that are just completely missing the mark? Who would like to go first?
Ooh, I want this one first.
Go for it.
I'll answer from the higher ed space, because while I have worked in support of K-12 teacher professional development and whatnot, my work has been at the state and the higher ed level. I think anytime that you're open to having programming that is diverse, be it from the arts, be it from any other kind of way, that's incredible. And by diverse, I mean thinking about different cultures, thinking about different countries, thinking about different languages. Universities have the potential to do that very, very well, just because of how they're structured through student activities, through the different disciplines that we study. Where I think we can do a much better job is to avoid assigning the responsibility of pushing the diversity on the people who you think are the ones needing the diversity. Yes, you need to have African American, Hispanic, and Latino Americans. You need to have lots of different people, but you don't need to assign them to be the ones to take care of all of the diversity work. You need to include everyone in the work. You need to invite everyone to the work and not shoulder that responsibility on them. Case in point, every faculty member who joins a university campus on their first appointment is usually on a tenure track. And more often than not, if they are a minority, they are expected to serve and be the person to hold up as the example of diversity for that university. It doesn't matter when, where, how, they're expected to be there. And if they are absent from an event, they hear about it. even if they had a family commitment they needed to deal with, their job is to visibly show that the university is diverse.
Wow.
Molly or Deidre, do either one of you want to take that?
I'll go and say that one thing I think we're doing right that we still can do more of is we do acknowledge ethnicity in study. We have units, we have events for students. We do that on a regular basis in schools, in many schools. I won't say all. But I think as a staff or a faculty, I don't know that we do it separately from the children. And then how, if we were to do it separately, how would we use that information to improve our teaching environment? And so that's one thought.
Okay. Molly, did you want to contribute?
I think from, my side of it is the advocacy side. That's the side I know that I am and that I work in. I would like to see more diversity in that area, which is why creating an organization to help support the schools and that works with educators, works with administrators to help empower these children to get them the services that they need. In my world, there's just not a lot of diversity. So I would like to see that. And I do feel that falls, like what many of you have said, it absolutely falls on my shoulders as well. So in the advocacy world, I think we definitely need more diversity. Yes.
Absolutely. More representation for sure. And Miss Andrea. Oh, you're on mute. Hold on, let me let her know she's on mute. Gotta love technology. She looks like she's saying something really great too.
She does.
Okay, I'm gonna text her. Let's see if we can. Does anybody want a closing? Oh, she just realized. No,
what I was saying was I want to start it with the what I feel is being done correctly. I feel as though the collection of data, we can't analyze what really is going on positively or negatively unless we go out and we collect data. You can't say you have a diversity issue if you don't know how many how people identify, number one, and what they identify as. And then how can you say you're giving opportunities to minorities if you aren't collecting, identifying demographics for your presenters, your educators? I think, yes, we do need more diverse teachers. We need Black, Hispanics. When a child goes into K through 12 or higher education, they need to see people who look like them, have a similar background. But what about administrators, right? So you see all of the I've been in many professional spaces where I saw the worker bees were minorities, but the leadership were all white men. So having them in leaderships within their institution, their K through their college, their university, their elementary school, as well as superintendents. I'm seeing when I go onto anyone's campus, I'm seeing that the staff positions are your minority positions. Your cleaning staff is those where your minorities are held, but your presidents, your cabinets are all typically white, with your one or two what's perceived as token people. Areas that I feel as though needs improvement is allegations of resources, right? So I'm not sure if anyone follows me on social media, but one of the things that I've spoken about in the past is that we're rewarding. And keep in mind, I'm in higher education. So by the time a student comes to me, they're already it's kind of too late to correct any type of reading deficiencies, any type of math and science deficiencies. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's challenging to bring someone from a 6th grade level to college proficiency within a summer bridge program or the first semester that they're there. They're going to have some challenges. And that's when when their grit has to come in and they have, their tenacity has to pull them forward. But that's already an unfair advantage. So when I say allegations and resources, when a elementary, middle, or high school performs or excels on their state testing, they get rewarded with funding back to their school. Whereas those who are not necessarily performing up to par or they have deficiencies, they're not winning that state money to go in to do math literacy and reading literacy programs. Or if they are rewarding money, there are so many socioeconomic issues that principal has to decide, okay, are we going to get another resource officer? Are we going to get more money in are we going to allocate these funding for food to the kids? Because when they go home on the weekend, they may not have food, and it may not be a community program that can supplement that need. So we're thinking, well, this school, they're underperforming in education. Well, are you really going into that school to see how they're allocating that those fundings, and that funding? And so I would say that's a serious area that needs to be reviewed. I hope I answered that question correctly.
I think you answered it perfectly. And not only do I think you answered it perfectly, but that really
Go
ahead. Okay, well, I'll see if she wants to jump back in. What I was going to say is what Andrea said really kind of paints a picture of kind of what things were like pre-COVID. So now let's look at it with COVID-19 in consideration. Do we feel like these things that were listed as areas of improvement are being considered as we're making preparations to go back to school? Are resources being considered? Access to Wi-Fi, things of that sort. Do you think it's being considered enough? A part of the conversation, especially Molly, with access to resources for special needs and that sort. Do you think that's being considered enough for those who will be virtual learners versus people in the classroom? Because obviously there's probably going to be a shortage of students and teachers in the classroom on the elementary and secondary levels. Do you think that is being made a priority, these demographics, when we're making these decisions? Not we, but when the powers that be are making these decisions for the upcoming school year, be it elementary or higher ed. And Molly, I want you to start with the answer, and then everybody else jump on in.
Okay, I'm happy to. Thank you. Well, from what I know, I can only, kind of report and talk about what is transparent, what the information that is actually given out from different districts and from the state of Arkansas and the Department of Education. Arkansas passed a law this last legislative session in 2019 to provide broadband access across the state. Is it in place yet? I don't think so. So there is an access issue for sure across definitely, the Little Rock School District and across a lot of different places in the state of Arkansas. And I'm sure this goes across the United States as well. That's going to play a big part in this. Do the children, are they going to be getting their services? I'm seeing parts of it. Some students are having their interventions put online. Those can be delivered online. Is it as effective as in person? Absolutely not. But it does help. I think we are really trying to reach for this level of stability that we used to have, and it's just not going to be, we're not going to be able to get there, is what I'm trying to say. And I feel like we need to be looking at different standards and saying we've got to make these adjustments for these students because we're holding them at a level that's just not going to be attainable at this point. That's my opinion. Are the services available? No, they weren't available before. So in this time, they're not going to be available now. It has highlighted this problem. It is a massive issue. We have 75% of our 10th graders in the Little Rock School District reading below the 10th grade level. The average grade level for the students is the 3rd to 4th grade. This COVID is compounding this issue. What can be done is to have teams in place to make these proactive plans. And I do believe that there are people within the district and within the Department of Education that are working to address these issues. The question is it enough? Is it going to be enough? And I don't think it's going to be enough. And I think that we need to have a 12-month plan in place. We need to have a 2-year plan, a 3-year plan, and a 5-year plan in place. And how are we going to address each one of these children in their needs, where they're coming from, where the regression is happening? I mean, this isn't just about reading and literacy and advocacy. It is about all the needs of these children, just span or just widespread. And how are those being addressed? One thing that I would like to see is transparency. I would like to see the reports. I would like to see when they have meetings and the state board meets and the district community advisory board meets. I would like to see those plans. What are the steps that are being taken? What are the actionable goals? And how are those goals being met? It's just like what we do in advocacy with you've got your needs, you've got your goals, and you match it with the services. I would like to see that across the board in these actionable plans. So I guess the short of the answer is, are these needs being met? No. Can they be met? I truly believe they can be. I do. It's going to take the community to step in and to help and support in order to get that done. And that is being done. I think there are learning pods being set up to reduce the class sizes. Parents are stepping in and taking, the handle on this. And that's very encouraging. But again, it's going to fall in the hands of the leadership to really make sure these plans are solid going forward to be able to meet the needs of the children, especially as they graduate and go into the workforce.
For sure. Okay, Deidre or Marta?
I'll go.
Okay.
I'm with Molly. I believe we're far behind where we need to be. I think the emergency education is going to look a lot like our regular education. We're going to have the same deficiencies, and like Molly said, if not worse in some ways. I think when we sit down, we take a general education view when we're sitting down to discuss emergency learning. And unfortunately, that's, that may or may not, they're going to try to reach as many kids as possible in the largest net.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, as we know, there will be some that will be slipping through the net. And how we prevent that, how we catch those, as Molly said, that's where a lot of planning and a lot of thought needs to be right now taking place about that. How do we catch those? How do we prevent as much as we can?
Okay. Andrea is going to do her comment, and then we'll wrap this question up with you, Marta.
This is like the delay. I think she's thinking I'm going to go.
Oh. Okay. Let's see.
I think in higher education, I can't really give a yes or no to that question because I think it's going to depend on institution. I think our HBCUs, I think they're well aware of what majority, where the gaps are with majority of the students. They understand that some of these students, a large portion of students are first generation college students. Some of them are coming from lower socioeconomic areas, not just their particular family, but area to where internet may not be accessible or have broadband or whatever else is needed to be able to conduct classwork. I work in disability services. I don't think any institution out there that's not disability services centered are considering that population in their plans. Because again, we typically think of wheelchair users and extended time when it comes to disability services. We have low vision, hard of hearing students. We have students with mental health diagnoses and conditions that are being exacerbated by COVID-19. And so I know on my campus, we have a student wellness center. Every institution across the United States doesn't have that. They're not able to service their students in that capacity to where they can remain in college as well as get the mental health or health services that they need. So I think there's some institutions out there that, and I don't know if we're specifically talking about Arkansas. If we are, I work with or interact with coordinators across the states, and we are attempting to be as vocal as we can in advocating for our students. There are pros and cons for accessibility with going online for that particular population that I think that can service other students. And so we try to advocate for a universal design approach, meaning that you don't change, you don't give an accommodation to just one student. You see if, okay, can we implement this across the classroom so where it can benefit multiple students? And so those conversations are being had. Now I can't, in my K through 12 sphere, I don't particularly work at a high school, elementary, or middle school. However, I do attempt to coordinate services when students come to higher education, not just at UAMS, but at other institutions. I don't really see students who have disabilities being in the framework. And again, the reason why I'm specifying students with disabilities is because that's my main sphere, as well as, again, if you do a universal design approach starting with that demographic, it usually captures other demographics in the process. But yeah, that's kind of, it's not a standard yes or no. I think it's going to be based on institution, the particular institution. And I think it's going to go to what resources does that institution have. UA Fayetteville has a phenomenal, they receive a lot of resources. And so their COVID-19 plan is going to probably be more effective than, let's say, Pulaski Tech, just because the allocations of resources that are there.
I work at Pulaski Tech, so I will say our chancellor is doing her darndest. It's a top priority for sure, and especially I think we have her ear with our women come togethers. So points taken and will be shared. Go ahead, Marta.
First, I got to thank Deidre, because Deidre, you just gave me something I'm going to use. I'm totally going to use. I'll give you credit for it. Emergency Education Department. That is exactly how we're treating this situation right now. Right. And it's triage. It's absolute triage. And it's going to be horrific, in my personal and professional opinion, when it comes to those students who do not fit inside of that very neat box that they're saying when they want to apply these solutions to the majority of what's going to happen. In states like Arkansas, a lot of kids are going to suffer if we do not pay attention to the fact that we have a lot of different kinds of needs within our student population, and that is K to 20. And then beyond, actually, because we aren't even talking about adult education and corporate education models and adjustments that need to be made for that as well in light of COVID. What I will add to that very briefly is that when we think about resource allocation and we think about how we can help those who don't have as many resources as we have in certain areas, the universities in Arkansas, the research universities in Arkansas, I feel have an obligation, particularly the public funded ones. And I'm from Fayetteville, so I'll say it. If University of Arkansas has a superior COVID response plan, they are the flagship research university for the state, apart from the medical research that UAMS does. Sure. Why is their plan not something that's being considered and involving all the other UA system schools and the non-UA system schools? They are our public flagship university. Transparency. If they've got a stellar plan, let's share it with everybody so they can see what parts of those plans can be helpful. That just makes sense to me.
I concur. Okay, so let's shift a little bit from talking about students and families and to professionals in this field who occupy these spaces that we've been discussing. And obviously, because we are women who are coming together, let's talk about women in these spaces and women of color. In what ways are women of color in educational spaces being supported to advance professionally and to grow in their fields?
You
All
know,
right, I'll start.
Okay, go ahead, Deidre.
I know that we have, I'll just say for Arkansas, the Little Rock area, I know we have leadership programs, but it's for a general audience. I don't know that we have leadership programs based on representation. Like if there's if we're trying to seek more African American males, or if we're trying to seek more African American females, is there a particular leadership program for them? I don't think so. So I thought that question is a very good question, and one we definitely could improve on. We could have a leadership program focusing on particular groups that need to be pushed into the system. So we should.
Okay, who wants to chime in? Marta and Molly?
I'll go.
Go for it.
So I think that there are a lot of options for leadership development. I am a graduate of Leadership Hot Springs. And some time ago, I set it in my mind that I was going to do a couple of other ones. I wanted to do a local one, I wanted to do a regional one, and I wanted to do a state one. So there's Leadership Arkansas, I think is what they call it. And then there's also Leadership AR. The thing is that those are all slated toward economic development. And so they encourage diverse disciplines and occupations to come and participate, but it's about economic development. There wasn't a lot in there for someone who has my kind of background with education advocacy, community outreach and engagement, and grant writing and fundraising and research because of the social behavioral science side of what I do. But I tried to infuse my areas into what it was we were doing in that economic development space. The other places you see leadership opportunities, it's you got to fit into a particular gender thing. So it would be something for women leaders in Arkansas, which might not necessarily include some of the nuances that have to be addressed because African American women in Arkansas face slightly different challenges than Caucasian American women in Arkansas, face slightly different challenges from Latinas who are women in Arkansas. We all need to feel safe in the spaces and avoid the fear factor. There are a lot of people who do not come forward and share information because they're afraid of getting tagged as a problem maker. And they feel it'll cut off opportunities they're going to do. That's Black, white, and otherwise. So how do we create the spaces where people feel safe? Rather than starting a brand new organization, can we help some of the established ones who already have funding figure out how to better invite us into those spaces so we feel welcome, included, and respected?
I love it. Molly, do you want to chime in?
Yes, I mean, across the board, what you all have said about this, the leadership, I don't see it. I don't. I know maybe it's there. I don't know. I haven't seen it. It's a need. It's a need. It needs to be created. And like what Marta was saying, why create a new organization? I do like that train of thought, because if there's something already out there that is established, I can't imagine why any organization would not want to create a diversity inclusive committee, and a team that goes around and empowers all races to be a part of this. I mean, it's just, you would think that it's just kind of like it should happen, and it's just all of a sudden you look up and you go, well, it's not there. Where is it? Where do we go? How do we do this? And so yeah, it's needed. It's absolutely needed.
Okay, Andrea's going to chime in right before she goes. I do want to say too, I think one thing that I notice with myself and Molly, I'm curious because you're very, very well versed in all that you advocate for. Like, who pushed you? Because I'm well versed on my subject matters, but I had to go find my own mentors. I didn't have people in my workplace. I did not have the supervisor that said, I think you're going to be really good at this, or I see that you're passionate about this. So on us, why don't you go take this class to further develop yourself? You know, and I think that's the crux of the problem for me, is that I am self-financing my professional development. And I feel like a lot of times other colleagues are not, and it's because we might look different, or maybe because I'm just loud and I might be too pushy. I don't know. But I know a lot of times there's so many organizations that you can be membership of. There's so many different trainings that you can partake in, and it's like you don't even know about them until somebody tells you about them. But then when someone tells you about them, you realize your entire community already knew about it. They just didn't share it with you. And I feel like that's a problem. And we need to be supported as women and as women of color better there. If you work at an elementary school and there's a NASP training or something that is in your field, your supervisor should be asking you, do you think this will help you get to where you want to go next in your career? And if so, you know, write out the justification so we can pay to send you there. There should be allocated funds to make sure that women and women of color in every field are being supported financially by their employers to get to where they want to go economically. And with that, Andrea, go ahead. I'm sorry. Okay, Andrea's gonna wrap this question up.
So I thought about how I was going to answer this question, especially since I'm not sure who is actually watching this. But since Adora brought me on and she knows me personally, I figured that I have the green light to answer this question the best way that I can. So first and foremost, higher education is political. I don't care if it's a state institution, private, or whatnot. And so typically you can network into a position depending on if it's grant funded or who the powers that be who the powers may be are in play. You can network into a position without having being credentialed. You will still probably need to get your credentials. And when I say credentials, I mean some type of master's or PhD terminal degree type position, which us African American women don't have a problem going out and getting masters and PhDs and JDs and other terminal type of degrees. It's just the networking part that we building alliances with the powers that be, identifying who holds the power on that particular campus, or if it's another campus that we want to go to. Many of the women that I know are being mentored within small groups of each other. So my group who helps me with my professional development, we're a small group of about 6 women, and we advocate within our institutions or where we want to go within our network to help another person out. That's not uncommon with any other group. I'm not saying my group has this secret formula to make things work. That's not uncommon, but the amount of effort that we have to do, I think, is way more than other groups have to do. And when I say other groups, I'm specifically talking about white men and white women. And then I'm again speaking specifically in higher education. One of my colleagues mentioned professional development to me, and I totally agree with that. Resumes get you interviews. Your interview gets you the job. Your professional alliances. I sit on search committees here at other institutions or whatnot, other groups, and I can see why in the past, I didn't get an interview, or I could see why I didn't get a job based on how I interviewed and what was on my resume, because I got to sit at the table. And so the experiences that I have, I'm not able to help other minority women to not lie on their resume or not lie in their interview, but to put their foot forward. And when I have the conversations, they're like, wow, I didn't even think to put that on my resume. Right. But the other 50 people who submitted their resume, like, that's the norm. And so I think having those conversations, which include professional development, when we typically, I think in the common sphere, we have a narrow scope on what professional development looks like. Again, being on those search committees, it's expanding my mind personally. Having someone, when I got a previous job, hearing what my references said to me, completely different than how I would advocate for someone, because again, your references is who advocates for you. And hearing other people, when I call and I'm on the committee to check references, seeing how those people professionally advocate for those people, I wouldn't have never had those experiences had my provost not put me on the search committee. And so when I try to here getting published, presenting to mass groups, that also contributes to your vita, and that makes you more desirable and more marketable. And having those conversations with young professionals, so when it is time for them to become a tenured faculty member, because again, everyone doesn't want to be a president of an institute. I don't want to be a president of an institution. I don't even want to marry a president of an institution. But everyone's not trying to get a cabinet position. Some people are okay excelling in research. How do you become a lead researcher, etc.? And so that's what professional development consists of. Professional development is mentoring people. I had a conversation with someone. If you don't know me personally, I'm a very direct person. I don't try to offend people, but I'm just direct. And so they were like, well, I don't want to pick a minority just because they're a minority. And I'm like, white people do that all the time. And not, I don't think it's from a malicious standpoint. You pick people who you feel as though you have something in common with. So if this person went to your predominantly white institution, and they share an alma mater with you, you have a commonality. You have something in common with them, and it's a predominantly white institution. They're probably white, right? If they joined your fraternity or professional organization, and those are predominantly white organizations, they're white. So you are inadvertently picking to mentor someone because you have something in common with them and they're white. So what if you pick someone who you feel is valuable and they're a minority? And so I feel as though when it comes to development opportunities, we're like, well, I don't want to be perceived a certain type of way, but you don't think that you're perceived a certain type of way when you're choosing white people. And so I try to have conversations centered around that. And again, not from a place to offend people, but to think about it differently. If you, again, with the data, if your last 10 interns have been white males or whatnot, white women, or homogenous, you need to probably evaluate why is it the last 10 interns have not had any type of diversity and choose differently.
That is a great point. And Deidre, I think you were going to wrap us up on that question.
Yeah, I was thinking that, we emphasize professional development, but not necessarily leadership development as it relates to underrepresented groups. And I think also, I was thinking of a program of leadership, but just a gesture, like inviting you to serve on a committee, as Andrea mentioned to you, inviting you to go to a particular training. A gesture from your administrator may be something that we need to be trained to do, those that are administrators.
Adora, can I offer one solution too?
Absolutely.
I thought about it after hearing all this. There are two disciplines that come to mind that do a much better job, I think, than in general higher ed does when it comes to professional development. By the way, professional development should start in K-12 too, but that's another conversation. Nursing creates career ladders, and they visit with nurses who want to make it the profession. They say, which ladder do you want to climb? And so once they say what they want to do, they say, these are the steps that you need to take to go ahead and get where you want to be. We don't do that well in higher ed across the board, whether you're talking about with underserved minorities or you're talking about majority members. We don't do that well. It's informal. And because you have so many senior faculty and senior administrators who are disproportionately Caucasian, just because of the way our university systems were structured in this country, unless you're talking about the HBCUs, you're going to have that problem. It's going to stay informal until you decide to bring it into the formal realm and you make it transparent. If you want to become a college president, these are the things you need to do. If you want to become a senior researcher in engineering or in education or whatever, these are the steps that you have to take, not just you got to get tenured. The other discipline that does it really well is the military. They tell you, if you want to get to this particular level, if you want to become a general, if you want to do this, these are the things you need to go. These are the places you need to serve. These are the skills you need to acquire when you're going through that. I would like to see higher ed, in particular, adopt a more standardized career ladder and be transparent about what you need to do to be successful. And in that way, that means if a Black woman does the steps, the Black woman ought to excel. If a white man does the steps, the white man ought to excel. Stop letting that be so informal.
I love it. I love it. And Andrea wanted to chime in with one last thing on this question.
And something I want to add, I think what we fail to realize sometimes is that people who lack opportunities and resources, I think they bring an entirely different perspective to the table when it comes to decision making and creativity. And so when I look at the historical aspect, the inventors, the architects, the engineers from minority groups, they've been able to be creative and innovative because they lacked resources, they lacked opportunities. When you look at the HBCUs, you know, we had some brilliant inventors come out during slavery, et cetera, because resources were lacking during that time frame. And I sat on a panel one time because my first degree is in history, for those who don't know me. I sat on a panel and they were talking about how were slaves able to be innovative and how are HBCUs a certain type of way and how are people in the disability community able to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I was like, because they lacked opportunity, sometimes, not all of the time, they lacked resources as well as opportunities because the majority prevented that. And so if you are in an institution that lacks resources, the people who have a background in a lower socioeconomic environment, again, when I say environment, it doesn't necessarily mean that that family is lower socioeconomic. It could be the town and city that they came from. Those people, when you're trying to look at mobility challenges, those people who have mobility challenges are the best people to be at the table. Those with learning disabilities to explain how they're able to learn. And that one person can't speak for everyone with a learning disability. That one person who uses a chair can't speak for everyone who uses a wheelchair, but they allow a creative standpoint position. And so with that, but they also need professional development as well, right? I think the question was specific on women of color. I try to be diverse in every panel that I sit on because if there is a lack for women of color, there's going to be a lack with another community that's out there. And that's not trying to dim women of color's spotlight or whatnot, but just to put that on the table as well. There's work to be done across every spectrum.
Amen. Amen. Representation. Cherie Ellis just said representation at every level. It matters. And you are spot on. So with that, we're just going to jump into our last question because we're getting to the end of our hour. So I want a final comment from each of you about, okay, where do we go from here? We have people watching. What do you want to say that you want them to take away from this conversation? We know we cannot solve all the world's problems in 1 hour, but from the things that we've talked about today, what's something that you want people to take away? And let's see, Molly, did you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. To reach out. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. I think if, you know, in my world, I want people to reach out. I need to connect with people. I need to find the children, you know, that need the services, that need the help, and the parents. I need to contact them. I need to talk to them. And it's okay. It's okay to talk about. It's okay. Look, it's okay to learn. You know, I mean, it's just, this isn't where we are right now. It's not where we need to be. We have to grow from this. We have to move forward. And I want people to know I'm here to hold hands with whoever wants to go and do this, and willing to do whatever it takes to get us to where, and to get our children and to get our leaders where they need and want to be, because we aren't where we need to be right now.
Spot on.
But that means that there's an opportunity for us to go somewhere. So let's go. Let's do it.
There you
Reach
go.
out.
Deidre?
I've been participating in a diverse conversation, I guess you could say, each week with a college friend. And he's actually originally from Ghana. He lived in Iowa. He went to Arkansas State. He's worked in London and Dubai. He's been all over the world. So he wanted to bring us together, to talk about current issues. And one of the things that I've had a light bulb moment about is that in America, we are so many different people. We're very complex. If we go to another country, I'll just say, let's say Germany, it may not be as diverse. It may not be. I don't live in Germany, so I can't say. But I would imagine that America would be the place where it's most diverse in the type of people that live here, right? In our ethnicity, our religion, etc. With that said, sometimes particular countries, we want to know the do's and don'ts of that country before we go there. So we study information, we talk to people about that country, and we go there and we try to represent ourselves based on that knowledge we've learned. We're here in the United States, when we're in the workplace, why aren't we doing that more? If you're in the workplace with all of these different diverse groups, whoever is in charge of our professional development needs to implement training related to those groups.
There you go.
So we can walk with each other like we would in another country and feel good and feel welcome and celebrate each other. We don't even know what to celebrate. We don't even know how we're offending because we don't have the knowledge.
I love it. Marta, what you got to say? That was awesome.
I think we have to, as women and as women leaders, we have to continue to be bold. And we also need to extend grace. And grace doesn't mean accepting apathy. But I see a lot of people screaming at each other right now. You have people of good intention who are saying, there's something I don't know, and I'm trying to find out. And I see them getting responses of people screaming at them. We've got to be bold. We've got to be fearless. We also need to extend grace and mercy with one another. This is going to be hard. This has always been hard. And as Deidre pointed out, it's especially hard because America is a grand experiment. Most countries do not have this mishmash salad bowl that we have of culture, religion, differences of opinion, regionalities, topography, all this stuff. We are a great and grand experiment, and we shouldn't be afraid of doing what's hard.
There you go. And Andrea, what say you?
I think my final thoughts will be we all have to do the work. There are minorities who need growth opportunities and development. We all have to do self-work regardless of our cultural background. And so part of that work is trying to be inclusive, understanding what other people's needs may be, seeing people as an individual, but not outside of their culture. And what I mean by that is, although I'm an African-American woman, again, I can't speak for every African-American woman that's out there, but that's part of my identity. I think also calling out biases and microaggressions. I know some people have smaller voices than others, but there's ways that you can do it within your sphere, and it shouldn't be comfortable. Making sure other people have rights and opportunities and are treated with respect. The person that's delivering that shouldn't be focused on making someone else comfortable in the process. So I encourage people to use their big voice, do the self-work, and make sure that you're inclusive of others.
Well, ladies, I want to thank you for offering your thoughts and your expertise and just coming together to have a conversation today. I hope it modeled for our viewers out there how easy it is to come to the table and have a conversation and to let it all out and be open and honest and candid. I hope that many will take heed. And with our come togethers, we always have homework. So for our viewers and our panelists, here's your homework for today. Consider the questions asked today. Consider your skill sets and your circles of influence, and make a list of 3 things you can do to make an impact in the context of cultural competency in educational spaces. Whether that is using your resources to go challenge the powers that be that are making decisions for the upcoming school year, whether that's going into your professional space and challenging your leadership to make sure that there's more opportunities available for people to advance and to kind of copy the model of the military and the nurse ladder. What will you do? That is your homework. And so with that, again, I want to thank you all. And I invite you all out there to join us next week when we talk about being an entrepreneur and all things business. So thank you again and have a great week. Ew, get me off of here.